This procedure is entirely reversible, Dr. Vera, the human scientist assured her, adjusting electrodes on her temples. A simple consciousness transfer, 6 hours maximum, then we switch you back. Vera's iridescent skin flickered with skepticism as she reclined on the laboratory bed. From the opposite platform, the human subject, Kale, watched her with undisguised curiosity. "I understand the protocol," she replied, her voice carrying the musical harmonic overtones of the Nelari species. 6 hours experiencing your primitive biology should provide sufficient data for my xenobiological research. She noticed Kale's jaw tighten at the word primitive, but he remained silent. For a mercenary hired to participate in the experiment, he showed remarkable restraint. Most humans would have responded emotionally to such an assessment. "Initiating neural mapping," announced Dr. Renfield, the lead human scientist. "Consciousness transfer in 3, 2, 1. A surge of energy engulfed Vera's awareness. The sensation of floating, dissolving, then rapid reassembly followed. When she opened her eyes, the perspective had changed. She was looking at her own body from across the room. The transfer had worked. She was inside the human's body. "Status report," Dr. Renfield inquired, peering at her at Kale's face with intense scientific scrutiny. Vera attempted to respond, but the mechanics of human speech felt alien. The tongue was unwieldy, the vocal cords crude compared to her natural form's resonance chambers. "Functional," she finally managed, the word emerging in Kale's deep voice. "The sensory input is overwhelming." That was an understatement. Every nerve ending screamed with information. Temperature, pressure, the scratchy fabric of the medical gown against skin covered in microscopic hairs. It was barbaric in its intensity. Across the room, she watched her own body sit up awkwardly. Kale was now piloting her form, his movements lacking the fluid grace typical of Nelari physiology. "This is different," he said, her voice sounding strange with his speech patterns. Dr. Renfield smiled triumphantly. "Excellent. The first successful cross-species consciousness transfer in scientific history. How do you both feel?" Before either could respond, alarms blared throughout the laboratory. The neural interface equipment sparked violently. "Quantum field destabilization," shouted a technician. "The entanglement is collapsing." "What does that mean?" Kale demanded, the harmonic tones of Vera's voice flattening with his alarm. Dr. Renfield's face paled. "It means we can't reverse the transfer, not immediately." "Define not immediately," Vera demanded, struggling with the crude imprecision of human vocal expression. "The equipment needs complete recalibration and reconstruction," Renfield explained, examining rapidly scrolling data. "Conservative estimate, 8 weeks. 2 months, Vera stood, immediately regretting the sudden movement as unfamiliar muscles tensed and balance shifted. 2 months in this body. "I'm not exactly thrilled either, Professor," Kale retorted from her form. "Being trapped in a body that feels like it's made of glass isn't my idea of a good time." Vera felt a surge of something hot and uncomfortable rise through her borrowed chest. Anger? No, worse. Humiliation, and the sensation was magnified by unfamiliar human biochemistry. "We'll make accommodations," Dr. Renfield assured them. "You'll both receive training on managing your temporary physiologies." Vera closed her eyes, feeling the heavy thud of a human heart in her chest. 2 months of hunger, fatigue, emotional volatility, and primitive biological functions. 2 months trapped in the body of a mercenary who clearly resented her assessment of his species. "The data collected will be unprecedented," Dr. Renfield added hopefully. "Begin documenting everything immediately," Vera instructed, scientific instinct taking over. "Hormonal fluctuations, neurochemical responses, sensory processing differences. If I must endure this situation, it will advance xenobiology by decades." Kale laughed, the sound strange in her voice. "You might want to hold off on your grand research plans until you've figured out how to work the bathroom." The crude reference to human biological functions sent another wave of discomfort through her. This was going to be a long, undignified 2 months. 1 week into the experiment, and Vera was ready to tear her borrowed skin off. Everything about Kale's body was loud. Sensations screamed rather than whispered, needs demanded rather than suggested. "How do you tolerate existing like this?" she demanded, packing the research facility's common room where Kale reclined in her body, looking annoyingly serene. "Problem?" he asked, the slight smile on her face appearing foreign. Her species rarely displayed emotion so overtly. "I'm constantly hungry," Vera complained, running Kale's hand through his short, coarse hair. "I eat, and 30 minutes later hunger returns, and sleep. 6 to 8 hours of unconsciousness every day. How has your species survived with such inefficiency?" Kale shrugged with her slender shoulders. "You get used to it. Besides, I'm finding your body has its own challenges. Everything feels muted, distant. And your brain compartmentalizes everything. I can't just feel something, I have to analyze it first." Vera paused, momentarily distracted from her discomfort by scientific curiosity. "That's our evolutionary advantage. Emotion is processed through rational filters before it affects behavior." "Sounds boring," Kale replied. Before Vera could respond with a lecture on evolutionary efficiency, Dr. Renfield entered the room with monitoring equipment. "Time for your daily readings," the scientist announced. "How are we adapting today?" "The subject continues to experience difficulty with basic biological functions," Vera reported clinically, trying to ignore the hollow ache in her stomach. "Hunger is constant. Temperature regulation is inefficient. I'm either too hot or too cold. And the emotional volatility is most disturbing." "Emotional volatility?" Dr. Renfield prompted, taking notes. Vera hesitated, uncomfortable with discussing the surges of feeling that ambushed her throughout the day. "Human biochemistry appears to trigger emotional responses independent of rational thought. Anger, frustration. Other responses I cannot categorize." From across the room, Kale's attention suddenly focused intently on her. Through her own eyes, now controlled by him, she saw a flash of concern. "What other responses?" he asked carefully. "Irrelevant," Vera dismissed, though she noticed her heart rate, Kale's heart rate, increasing. "They're simply biochemical anomalies." After Dr. Renfield finished the examination and left, Kale approached her. The graceful movement of her own body under his control was disconcerting. "You're experiencing my body's emotional responses," he said quietly. "That's normal, but you should know. Some of those responses might be residual." "Explain," Vera demanded, uncomfortable with how Kale's proximity was triggering another wave of those unclassifiable sensations. "Our scientists believe consciousness transfer doesn't completely reset the body's chemical patterns," he explained. "You might be feeling echoes of my emotional states from before the transfer." Vera's scientific mind immediately grasped the implications. "You mean your hormonal patterns, your neurochemical baselines, they're influencing my experience." "Exactly," Kale confirmed. "So if you're feeling things that don't make sense." A flash of heat surged through her borrowed body, centered strangely in her chest and lower abdomen. The sensation intensified as she looked at her own form standing before her, now inhabited by Kale. "What exactly am I experiencing echoes of?" she asked, his voice dropping lower. Kale looked away, the iridescent skin of her natural form pulsing with colors that reflected discomfort. "That's not important right now." But it was becoming increasingly clear to Vera that it was very important. Each time she was near Kale, near her own body, these unexplainable sensations intensified: heat, awareness, a strange hollowness coupled with tension. "I need to document everything for the research," she insisted, stepping closer. "What emotional patterns might I be experiencing?" The colors shifting across her natural skin grew more intense as Kale struggled with her question. Finally, he sighed, a very human gesture performed with her alien physiology. "Respect," he admitted, "professional curiosity, and attraction." The final word landed between them with physical weight. "Attraction," Vera repeated, the human vocal cords making the word sound rough. "You were physically attracted to me before the transfer." "You're a revolutionary xenobiologist from an advanced species," Kale said defensively. "Intelligence is attractive." Vera fell silent, processing this information alongside the confusing sensations in her temporary body. As a Nelari, she had never experienced physical attraction as humans understood it. Her species chose mates based on intellectual compatibility and genetic optimization. The idea that Kale's body was responding to her own form with some primitive biological drive was both scientifically fascinating and personally alarming. I'll add this variable to my research notes, she finally said, retreating to the clinical safety of scientific observation. But later that night, alone in Kale's quarters, she found herself looking at her reflection, his reflection in the mirror. Strong jaw, muscular form, eyes that held more intelligence than she had initially credited. And within this body, she could feel the echo of desire for her true form. For the first time, she wondered if this experiment would reveal more than just physiological differences between their species. Perhaps the most valuable data would come from experiencing what it truly meant to be human, messy, emotional, and driven by desires that defied logical categorization. The thought was terrifying and strangely exhilarating. 3 weeks into the experiment, Vera made an alarming discovery. The human body was capable of joy. This revelation came unexpectedly. She had been running, reluctantly participating in the daily exercise routine necessary for maintaining Kale's muscular physiology, when suddenly something changed. The discomfort of exertion transformed into a rush of pleasurable sensation. Her borrowed heart pounded, lungs burned, and yet a flood of chemicals made her feel powerful, alive, even euphoric. "What is this?" she asked the medical staff afterward, still breathing heavily. "Endorphins," Dr. Renfield explained. "Natural opioids released during exercise, stress, or pain. Humans evolved to reward physical exertion." "Fascinating," Vera muttered, examining the data on her tablet. "A biochemical reward system for sustaining physical stress." But it wasn't just exercise. As the days passed, Vera discovered numerous sensory experiences her Nellari body had never provided. The taste of chocolate triggered a cascade of pleasure so intense she nearly gasped. The warmth of sunlight on skin created a contentment so deep it silenced her analytical mind. Even sleep, which she had initially despised as inefficient, revealed itself to be glorious. Dreams painted vividly with emotions and sensations her species never experienced. Each discovery was meticulously documented in her research journal. Each entry became less clinical, more filled with wonder. "You're adapting," Kale observed one evening as they shared a meal in the facility's dining area. Vera looked up, momentarily lost in the complex flavors of the simple pasta dish before her. "I'm conducting thorough research," she corrected. Kale smiled with her face, a gesture that looked increasingly natural as he adapted to her physiology. "You were humming while eating. That's not research, that's enjoyment." She started to deny it, then stopped. The intellectual honesty that made her an elite scientist wouldn't allow the lie. "These sensory experiences are educational," she admitted carefully. "Just say it," Kale pressed, leaning forward. "Some aspects of being human are actually pleasant." Vera set down her fork. "Your species processes sensory input differently. The immediacy has certain advantages." "Advantages?" Kale raised an eyebrow, her eyebrow in challenge. "In Nellari physiology, sensations are processed through multiple cognitive filters," she explained. "Everything is analyzed, categorized, and contextualized before we fully experience it. Here," she gestured to the body she temporarily inhabited, "everything is direct, unfiltered, overwhelming at times, but also." "Also," Kale prompted. "More vivid," she admitted, "more present." Something shifted in Kale's expression, in her own face watching her. A softening, a recognition. "That's what I've always thought about your species," he said quietly. "You're so advanced, so logical, but you miss the immediacy of experience. The messiness is what makes it real." For a moment, they sat in silence, each inhabiting the other's reality, understanding through direct experience what no amount of theoretical study could convey. Later that night, alone in Kale's quarters, Vera stood before the mirror again. Over the weeks, she had become accustomed to this body, its strength, its constant hunger, its capacity for sensation. She lifted a hand, watching the play of muscles beneath the skin. This form, which she had initially dismissed as primitive, was a marvel of evolution designed for immediate, intense experience. Almost without conscious thought, her hand moved across the chest, feeling the texture of skin, the contours of muscle. A flush of heat followed the touch, intensifying as her hand moved lower. The sensation was similar to what she felt when near Kale, but stronger now, more focused. This was desire, human desire, unfiltered by Nellari cognitive processes. Raw, demanding, and directed at a body that had once been hers, now occupied by another consciousness. The realization should have been disturbing. Instead, It sparked scientific curiosity alongside the growing heat. What would it be like to fully experience this aspect of human existence, to understand physical intimacy through this body's unfiltered perspective? A knock at her door interrupted these thoughts. When she opened it, she found Kale, her own body, standing there, the iridescent skin pulsing with colors that reflected agitation. "We need to talk," he said, entering without waiting for invitation. "I'm experiencing something in your body that I don't understand." Vera stepped back, suddenly acutely aware of the lingering sensations from moments earlier. "What is it?" "A connection," Kale said, frustration evident in his tone. "When you experience strong emotions in my body, I feel echoes of them in yours. It's some kind of quantum entanglement effect from the transfer." Vera froze, scientific alarm cutting through the haze of sensation. "You can feel what I'm feeling." "Not exactly," Kale clarified. "Just ripples, enough to know when you're experiencing something intense." He paused, the colors shifting across her natural skin in patterns that indicated embarrassment. "Like what you were feeling just now." Heat flooded her face, a human response she still hadn't mastered controlling. "That was scientific exploration," she defended weakly. Kale's expression, her own face, softened with something between amusement and understanding. "It's okay to admit you're curious about how it feels. Human bodies are designed for pleasure as much as survival." The directness was startling, but Vera found herself responding to it. Perhaps the weeks in this unfiltered human form had affected her more than she realized. "Your body seems to respond to mine," she admitted. "Is that normal for humans, to desire their own form?" "It's not desiring its own form," Kale explained gently. "It's responding to you, to who you are, regardless of which body you're in. That's how human attraction often works. It transcends the physical." This concept, attraction based on something beyond genetic optimization, was alien to her understanding. Yet in this moment, looking at her own form inhabited by Kale's consciousness, she felt the truth of it in a way her Nelari mind might never have grasped. "Then this experiment is yielding unexpected data," she said, trying to reclaim scientific distance even as Kale stepped closer. The boundaries between researcher and subject, between their very identities, growing increasingly blurred. "The neural entanglement is strengthening," Dr. Renfield announced, studying the brain scan results with a furrowed brow. "Your consciousness patterns are synchronizing in ways we didn't anticipate." Vera and Kale exchanged glances across the laboratory. 5 weeks into their forced cohabitation in each other's bodies, something fundamental had shifted between them, something beyond the scientific parameters of the experiment. "Is it dangerous?" Vera asked, feeling Kale's heart rate increase slightly at the question. "Not dangerous," Dr. Renfield clarified, "but unprecedented. The quantum field binding your consciousness to these temporary bodies appears to be creating a feedback loop. You're not just experiencing each other's physiology anymore, you're beginning to share sensory and emotional responses." Kale leaned forward, Vera's slender form tense with concern. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning," the scientist explained, "that when one of you experiences something intense, physically or emotionally, the other might experience an echo of it. The effect seems to strengthen with proximity." After the briefing, they walked silently through the research facility's garden, a small enclosed space with carefully cultivated earth plants. Vera had come to appreciate these moments outdoors, another unexpected pleasure of human existence. The feel of wind, the scent of growing things, the warmth of sunlight on skin. "You've been avoiding me," Kale finally said, breaking the silence. Vera didn't deny it. Since their conversation 3 nights ago, since the moment she'd been caught exploring the physical responses of his body, she had maintained strict professional distance. "The experiment has become complicated," she replied carefully. "That's one word for it." Kale stopped walking, turning to face her. The sight of her own body moving with his mannerisms still created a strange disconnect. "Can we at least be honest about what's happening?" "We're experiencing biochemical responses natural to our temporary physiologies," Vera stated, retreating into scientific terminology. Kale made a sound of frustration, a very human noise coming from her Nelari vocal structures. "Stop hiding behind jargon. You're feeling things in my body, real human emotions and desires, and I'm beginning to understand how your species experiences the world through your cognitive processes." That's the purpose of the experiment, she countered stiffly. But it's gone beyond that, hasn't it? Kale stepped closer, close enough that she could see the subtle color shifts in her iridescent skin responding to his emotional state. You're not just observing human experience anymore, you're living it. The accusation struck with unexpected force. He was right. Somewhere in these weeks, she had crossed the line from detached scientific observation to immersive participation. She had begun to anticipate the pleasures of eating, of exercise, of sleep. She had found herself watching her own body with Kale inside it, wondering how his consciousness interpreted her physiological responses. Last night, Kale continued, voice dropping lower, I felt something through our connection, something intense. What were you doing? Heat flooded her face, that maddening human response she couldn't control. That's not relevant to the research protocols. It is if it affects me. His expression, her face with his determination, softened slightly. Vera, whatever you're experiencing, I feel echoes of it, and if it's what I think it is, we should discuss it. The garden suddenly felt too small, too intimate. She turned away, but Kale caught her arm, Kale's arm, technically, stopping her retreat. You were touching my body, weren't you? He asked, his voice gentle rather than accusatory, exploring how it responds to pleasure. The directness of human communication, another aspect she had initially found primitive but now recognized as efficient, left no room for evasion. Yes, she admitted, the single word carrying the weight of scientific protocol breached, of boundaries crossed. She expected judgment or discomfort. Instead, Kale's expression showed understanding tinged with something warmer. It's natural to be curious, he said, but there's something you should know. When you touch that body, when you explore its responses, I feel it. Not completely, but enough to know when something significant happens. Vera's scientific mind immediately grasped the implications. The quantum entanglement, it's creating a sensory feedback loop between our consciousness patterns. Exactly, Kale confirmed. So last night when you were experimenting, I experienced an echo of those sensations in your body. The realization should have mortified her, should have sent her retreating to the safety of clinical distance. Instead, she felt a surge of that now familiar heat, intensified by the knowledge that her explorations had not been entirely private. That's unexpected data, she managed, clinging to scientific terminology even as Kale smiled at her transparent attempt at detachment. Very valuable data, he agreed, a hint of mischief in his tone. But I think we could gather more precise information with a controlled experiment. What kind of experiment? She asked, though something in her already knew, already wanted to know the answer. One where we explore these sensory echoes together, Kale suggested, his voice dropping to a register that sent a shiver through her borrowed nervous system. Where we discover how this connection works when we're both conscious participants rather than distant observers. The proposal shattered any pretense of scientific objectivity. What he was suggesting went far beyond the research protocols, beyond the boundaries established at the beginning of this experiment. Yet she couldn't deny the appeal, both intellectual and something far more primal. That would be unprecedented, she said carefully. This whole situation is unprecedented, Kale replied. Two consciousnesses experiencing each other's bodies, creating a quantum bridge between different physiological experiences of reality. We'd be fools not to explore it fully. He was offering a justification that satisfied her scientific mind while acknowledging the growing reality neither could deny. This had become more than an experiment. In living in each other's bodies, they had begun to understand each other in ways no other members of their species ever had. Perhaps, Vera finally said, stepping closer, a more thorough investigation is warranted. As the distance between them closed, she wondered which boundaries remained to be crossed, and whether either of them truly wanted to maintain them anymore. The laboratory hummed with activity as technicians made final preparations for the consciousness transfer reversal. After 8 weeks, 56 days of living in each other's bodies, Vera and Kale would return to their original forms. Vera stood before the window in Kale's quarters, watching the sunrise with a complex mixture of emotions that would have been impossible for her to process in her Nelari physiology. Anticipation, relief, and an unexpected melancholy colored her perception of the golden light spreading across the research facility grounds. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Kale entered, Carrying 2 cups of the coffee she had developed a surprising fondness for during her time in his body. "Last day as a human," he said, handing her a cup. "Having any second thoughts?" The question touched something raw and honest within her. "More than I expected," she admitted. They had both changed in these 2 months. The boundaries between researcher and subject had dissolved during that 4th week, replaced by something neither of them had language for, a unique intimacy born of literally experiencing existence through each other's biology. The night after their conversation in the garden had marked the transformation. Together, they had explored the sensory feedback loop created by their quantum entanglement. When he touched her in his body, she felt the echo through her consciousness in her original form. When she caressed her own iridescent skin with his consciousness inside, the sensation reflected back to her through their connection. It had been initially clinical, then curious, then something far more profound, a bridge between 2 fundamentally different ways of experiencing reality. "I reviewed my research notes this morning," Vera said, sipping the bitter liquid. "The earliest entries seem written by someone else entirely." Kale smiled with her face, the expression now natural after weeks of inhabitation. "Your first description of human hunger was particularly amusing. An undignified biological alarm system that interrupts cognitive processes with primitive demands." "I wasn't wrong," she pointed out, returning his smile with his own lips. "But I failed to document how satisfying it is to answer that alarm." They lapsed into comfortable silence, both contemplating the transition ahead. "Will you include everything in your official report?" Kale finally asked, the question carrying weight beyond its simple phrasing. Would she document the nights they had spent exploring the sensory connection between them? The discovery that pleasure shared through their quantum bridge was magnified rather than divided. The moments when the distinction between her consciousness and his seemed to blur entirely, creating experiences neither of their species had words to describe. "Not everything belongs in scientific literature," she replied carefully. "Some data is too personal for public dissemination." "The great xenobiologist Vera withholding research findings," Kale teased gently. "That doesn't sound like the cold, logical alien who arrived here 2 months ago." "Perhaps she no longer exists," Vera said, surprising herself with the admission. "Perhaps she was transformed by her data collection." Kale set down his cup and moved closer, taking her hand. His hand, technically, though that distinction had lost meaning weeks ago. "What happens after today, when we're back in our original bodies?" The question had haunted her for days. Once returned to her Nellari physiology, would these human experiences fade? Would the emotional responses she had learned to value be filtered once again through her species' cognitive processes? And what of this connection with Kale? "I don't know," she admitted. "Nellari neurobiology processes emotion differently. Without the direct biochemical responses of your body, I may not feel the same way." "I don't believe that," Kale said firmly. "What we've experienced goes beyond biochemistry. Your consciousness has been forever altered by living as human, just as mine has been changed by experiencing existence through Nellari perception." Before she could respond, Dr. Renfield's voice came through the communication system. "Transfer procedure begins in 30 minutes. Please report to the main laboratory." The walk to the lab was silent, each lost in contemplation of what lay ahead. The research team greeted them with excitement. From their perspective, this was the triumphant conclusion of a groundbreaking experiment. "We've triple-checked all systems," Dr. Renfield assured them as technicians attached neural interfaces. "The quantum entanglement has been stabilized. The transfer back should be smoother than the original procedure." Vera reclined on the laboratory bed, looking across at her own body where Kale's consciousness currently resided. For one final moment, she catalogued the sensations of human existence: the weight of limbs, the steady rhythm of heartbeat, the cascade of emotions unrestricted by cognitive filters. "Ready to return to your advanced superior form?" Kale asked, gentle teasing in his voice. "I've learned there are different kinds of advancement," she replied, "different ways of experiencing consciousness." Dr. Renfield initiated the countdown. "Consciousness transfer reversal in 3, 2, 1. The now familiar sensation of dissolution and reassembly washed over her. When Vera opened her eyes, she was looking out through her original body. The shift was jarring, colors more vivid, sounds sharper, but everything processed through layers of cognitive analysis before reaching her awareness. Across the room, Kale blinked, readjusting to his human physiology. Their eyes met over the expanse between the laboratory beds. "Status report," Dr. Renfield asked anxiously. "Transfer successful," Vera confirmed, her own harmonic voice sounding both familiar and strange after weeks of human vocal cords. "All cognitive functions appear normal." The research team erupted in celebration, but Vera remained focused on Kale, watching as he flexed his hands, reacquainting himself with his original form. When the initial medical checks were complete and the scientists had moved away to analyze data, he approached her bed. "How does it feel to be back?" he asked quietly. Vera conducted an internal assessment. Her consciousness had indeed returned to its natural processes, emotions filtered, sensations categorized, experiences analyzed before fully registered. Yet something had fundamentally changed. The neural pathways shaped by 8 weeks of human experience remained, creating new connections in her Nelari brain. "Different," she answered truthfully, "but not as different as I expected." She reached out, touching his hand with her iridescent fingers. The contact sparked a familiar response, muted compared to human sensation, but undeniably present. More surprisingly, she detected a faint echo through their quantum connection, weakened but not entirely severed. "The entanglement persists," she said, scientific curiosity blending with something warmer. Kale nodded, fingers intertwining with hers. "I can still feel traces of it, not as strong, but there." "An unexpected experimental outcome," Vera observed. Then, setting aside scientific terminology, she added, "but not an unwelcome one." "So what happens now?" Kale asked, the question encompassing far more than just research protocols. Vera considered this with both her restored Nelari analytical processes and the new pathways formed during her time in human form. The answer emerged not as pure logic or pure emotion, but as an integration of both, perhaps the most valuable outcome of their unprecedented exchange. "Now," she said, "we design a new experiment, one that explores how two fundamentally different species can share understanding beyond temporary physiological exchange." "That sounds like a long-term research project," Kale observed, a smile spreading across his face. "Indeed," Vera agreed, her iridescent skin glowing with colors that reflected emotions she no longer needed to suppress or analyze before acknowledging. "One that might take a lifetime of data collection." As the laboratory bustled around them, their hands remained connected, a small physical bridge representing something much larger. The transformation of understanding that came not from observing difference, but from experiencing it from within.